do you want to? I'll get that bit done. Yeah, go. Okay. So hello. Thank you for joining this afternoon. We know quite a few people are looking to watch this online afterwards, so thank you for watching it, as well as for those of you attending. We're doing a series of webinars that are picked essentially by our partners in research, which is our patient and public involvement group. And we alternate between doing partners in research webinars and webinars with Rich Voices, which is our care home related patient and public involvement group. So this afternoon, we are very lucky to be joined by Barbara and Winnie. Winnie will be a familiar face for some of you who know partners in research well. Winnie has very kindly been involved in lots of different pieces of work with us, but this is an example of pieces of work where we try and kind of facilitate people getting involved in other researchers' work. And my role is to help be part of that kind of facilitation and joining the group. And luckily, I get to work with Barbara, who I very much enjoy working with. So I'm going to just hand over to you guys to introduce yourselves, if that's okay. This is being recorded so that it can be watched and catch up online. So if you're not comfortable with that, just obviously keep your cameras off. I will keep an eye on the chat function. So if there's any questions that you have for Winnie or Barbara, just pop them in there and we will go through those at the end, or raise your hand if you would like to say anything in between. I will mute myself if other people could mute themselves if they're not talking, just so that we don't get too much background noise. And I will hand over to you. So Barbara, you can take it away.
Thank you, Rosie. I will just share my slides. Yeah, well, it's loading.
Yep, so they're on. They just need to do the full screen bit.
So you can see everything now correctly, I hope.
It's just, yeah, there you go.
Fantastic. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rosie and Helen, for organizing this webinar and for giving us an opportunity to share with you our research project. And thank you to those who joined us today, and also to those who will be listening to this webinar later. So my name is Barbora Silarova, and I work as a researcher at the University of Kent. And I'm joined today by also by my colleague Winnie Henry, who used to support her husband who had a dementia. And we are here to share with you our project on behalf of the whole team. And in this project, we focus on how we can best support carers of people living with dementia to look after their own health and well-being. Okay. So first things first, I have to disclose that this presentation reports independent research funded by the National Institute for Health and Care Research. And the views expressed in this presentation are those of the authors and not necessarily those of the National Institute for Health and Care Research or the Department of Health and Social Care. So at the moment, it is estimated that here in the UK, there are around 700,000 family members and friends who care for someone living with dementia. And these family members and friends are often labeled or described in literature as carers, unpaid carers, family carers, or supporters. But it's important to remember that these family members and friends who support someone living with dementia may never use these terms to describe themselves. We know from the literature and evidence that caring may be associated with a lot of positive aspects. However, when you care for someone living with dementia, you may also experience worse health and well-being. And carers themselves told us that it is exhausting to be a carer. It takes so much out of you. Carers also told us that they are overwhelmed as it is expected from them to do it all. And they also told us it's time to recognize how the caring impacts family members and friends of those living with dementia. We know from the evidence that when you are a carer of someone living with dementia, you may experience stress, depression, anxiety, grief, and physical and emotional burden. Alzheimer's Society conducted in 2020 a survey And in this survey, they concluded that 2/3 of carers desperately needed more support to protect their well-being. While from the evidence, we know that carers are at high risk of experiencing poor health and well-being, we know very little how to best support them to look after their own health and well-being. And therefore, the aim of this present project was to develop a research application that would be co-produced with unpaid carers of people living with dementia. And the focus of this research application was on how we could best support carers of people living with dementia to look after their own health and well-being. So I know that this term co-production is used a lot in adult social care, in healthcare, and in research. And we thought we would share with you a little bit how we approach co-production in our team. So here, as you can see on our slide, we were originally, our research team originally included 10 people, and we are now, our research team includes 9 people. And 2 of us are researchers, and 7 of us are either former or current carer of a person living with dementia. And we all live across England and Scotland, and carers themselves either supported their partners or they supported their parents. And some of them lived in the same household, and some of them lived in different households than the person with dementia. And I think that our co-researchers nicely illustrate how diverse the carers are when it comes to their caring experiences. So we work on the research application for 1 year, and the first 6 months we discuss what should be the focus of the research application, so which research questions we should answer. And then second half of year, we work together on how best to answer these research questions. So should we use a questionnaire? Should we conduct individual interviews or focus groups? We also spoke about how to best support co-researchers, what kind of training they will need in the future, and how we would like to work together. We also discussed in length how to best disseminate our findings. And I would like to highlight that we met every month online for 2 hours. So as I mentioned, during the first 6 months, we met every month to discuss the focus of the research application should be. And during this time, we identified 22 health and well-being concerns experienced by carers of people living with dementia. And here on these slides, you see the examples of these issues. So this included stress, frustration or anger, but also poor nutrition, lack of exercise, lack of sleep. Carers also identify that other carers experience loneliness, but also isolation. Carers also identify that it is really difficult for them to access their own dental care, and it's also really difficult for them to have a time to get their own medication. Carers also identified that many of them experience other chronic conditions, and this could include things like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. And carers also highlighted to me during these meetings that they may experience feelings of shame, stigma, and prejudice and discrimination. So out of these 22 health and well-being concerns, we then identified 8 key concerns experienced by unpaid carers of people living with dementia. And these 8 key concerns include a lack of exercise, poor nutrition. So this could be a range of things like, for example, not having a time to cook a nutritious meal, or for example, snacking on unhealthy food, but also coping with stress, coping with terminal illness, coping with emotions, getting help, knowledge, and time management. And my colleague Winnie will tell you more about 3 of these concerns. Winnie, over to you.
I have the unenviable position here of being 3 different people. Because first of all, I'm going to be Winnie, and then I'm going to be David, and then I'm going to be Mike. So just imagine me with a different cap on every time. I'll start with my own story. I found as a carer for my husband, who had vascular dementia, that the lack of knowledge was the main thing that I had to conquer. From he was first diagnosed, and I was given a bundle of papers and told to go home and read them, I realised that I was going to have a hard fight to get the best possible care for my loved one. Not one professional appeared to have the answers that I was looking for, and I felt I was getting fobbed off constantly. My way of coping with this was to stubbornly dig in my heels and keep asking for answers. It required a great amount of stubbornness on my part, and I had to become a bit less sensitive than I would normally be to rejection. And all this at a time when all you want is to do the best for the one you love, and you just don't know how. However, the answers are out there. It's just a case of if someone shuts the door in your face, you keep knocking until it's opened. Don't let anyone tell you that they do not have the answer to a question you're asking if the question seems to be sensible and valid. My answer always was, well, if you do not know the answer, you have a duty of care to my loved one, so please find an answer that I can understand and work with to make life as easy as possible for my husband. It's not easy to make folk listen to you, and because you're vulnerable, tired, sick with worry about the future, it is very easy to allow yourself and your questions to get brushed aside. But there is one thing you should always remember. When it comes to dementia, you, the carer, are living with the condition 24/7. You are the expert and deserve to be listened to.
Fantastic. Thank you, Winnie. And now we'll hear about Michael.
Oops, I was on the wrong page. Excuse me. I chose emotion because the main and only carer for my wonderful husband, it was something I had the greatest difficulty managing. Stress, anger, exhaustion, sadness, and fear were constant and unwelcome companions. And however much you may want to, you cannot hand over these feelings to someone else to resolve. Not like, for example, somebody coming in and giving him a wash or feeding him. Like it or not, these emotions are a constant in the process of caring for somebody you love. If they get out of hand, they interfere with the caring and eat away at the carer's well-being, stamina, and capability. We all know that bottling up strong emotions is not good for us. Indeed, in the long term, it could be damaging. And we need to recognise that in the role that carers undertake. Recognising that we are stressed is the first step. With such little time to think because there's so much to do, we may not be aware that we're accumulating frustrations along with exhaustion sometimes. It takes another person, not so closely connected with what's going on, to tell us that we need a break. However, this is not always possible and will conflict with our sense of duty and love for the person we care for. So much care is done by a hidden army of hard, unpaid workers, so we're not familiar with how difficult this task is because we simply don't see it. This makes it hard for the people to know what to do to support us. So where do we go with all of this? Excuse me. Firstly, we need to understand the demands and the impact of caring and how it may affect us. Secondly, to recognise that we are being emotionally affected by our caring role and that we have little control over the demands and responsibilities that we may have. We have to recognise that we may feel duty bound to continue our caring role for the person that we love as part of our commitment to that person that we shared during our lifetimes. We can't turn our back on this duty. Thirdly, we need to find out how we can plan for our own well-being as carers with small steps. On the slide, you can see some suggestions. Not all will work for everybody, but giving some thought to what would work for you. For me, perhaps the best support I found was talking to people in carer support groups. For others, it might be a respite break or counselling or extra carers if you can afford them, or perhaps taking some short periods of time out when you can. In summary, we need to understand there will never be enough time to do everything you want to do. And however much you set priorities, there will inevitably be pressure and conflicts. Remember, the person you're caring for would want you to be kind to yourself while you're doing this critically important and loving task.
Thank you, Winnie. And now we are moving to David.
Excuse me. Voice is starting to go, but I will do my best. David has written, "My name is David. I am a retired engineer and was a carer for my late wife, who had frontotemporal dementia with overlapping amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Everyone is different. The phrase still rings in my ears. It's true and may even be a catalyst for future research. All the textbooks in the world cannot prepare you for the difficulties you will experience having to look after a loved one diagnosed with a terminal neurological illness. Not only are they different, you're also different, and not everyone reacts in the same way. You have no idea how long this caring role will last, how intensive it will be, and how you will be affected. You're so consumed with caring for this individual 24/7 that you may not initially recognize the deterioration in their condition that is slowly evolving. From being a vibrant and intelligent human being to a helpless and somewhat pathetic individual, totally dependent on you for all their bodily needs. What is worse, you are totally consumed with their well-being, so you completely ignore the second most important person in the room, yourself. I was fortunate that my parents brought me up to be self-sufficient and taught me many life and domestic skills. This didn't make me immune from the stress and trauma that the caring role brings. You don't have time to think about yourself, nor do you care. You only have one person in mind. Difficult it may be, but you must arrange to have time out. You need sleep, you need calming time, a proper diet, and exercise. Unfortunately, this is not always available, and social services are not always there when you need them. I realised that social interaction was necessary for both of us. There was no time to dwell on my situation. I had to be mentally as well as physically active as I could be. I may have been grieving, but I had to be focused and occupied with hobbies, time permitting. And I bought a drum kit to bash away the stress. It was either that or punching holes indoors. I will never forget the experience that we went through. It has changed me. I am a different person now, more empathetic and understanding, and aware that more needs to be done. It's a travesty of our society that one has to go through all that suffering just to realise how important and necessary the care and caring role is, and how it needs to be strengthened and supported. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Winnie. What a fantastic job you did to share with everyone these 3 key health and well-being issues identified by carers. And as you heard from Winnie, she shared with you in the own words of Winnie, David, and Mike why coping with terminal illness, coping with emotions, and getting knowledge or information is important to carers of people living with dementia. I want to highlight to all of you that we also have illustration for 3 more health and well-being concerns as experienced by carers of people living with dementia. I will not go into details about these illustrations, but I will share a link to these illustrations in the chat, and also I will leave my contact details. So if you would like to receive them, just please get in touch. And these 3 further illustrations include time management, getting help, and coping with stress. Thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, as I said, I will leave my contact details and also link to illustrations. And feel free to get in touch if you have any feedback or if you would like to discuss any possible future collaborations. Yeah, we would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Barbara and Winnie. I did wonder if you were going to do some different voices there, Winnie, to really take on the persona of Mike and David. But thank you for sharing their experiences too. I think that's really helpful. And the illustrations are beautiful. I really like them. I think they've been done really well. Has anybody, I know everyone's got their mic off just now and camera, but is there any questions from the audience, if you like? If not, I will ask them. Should I ask one to get started? I'll ask you one to get started while people are having to think about any questions that they might have for you. So my question, Winnie, was for you, although I've realised I might wait till you're not feeling like you need to cough. Bless you. If you could give us an example of a time where you felt that you were asking questions and not getting the answers, and how you kind of went about challenging this or solving this.
Willie had a stroke and he was taken into our local hospital. At that time, they told me that I would no longer be able to care for him at home, that he needed 24/7 nursing. And I noticed that he was just lying in bed and nothing seemed to be happening. I couldn't see signs of physio or anything. So I made inquiries, as I always do, and I found out that there was a rehab unit at our local smaller sort of cottage hospital about 6 miles away from where I live. So I then went up and asked questions and looked around and said, my husband might be coming here, so I wanted to see what was involved and what he would get to do. Went back and said to the hospital ward, will my husband be going for this rehabilitation? no, he's got dementia. I said, yes, but he's had a stroke and he's capable of having some movement back if he has rehab. Why not? Because he's got dementia, what's the use? That was the answer I was getting. I was raging. So I then started researching, looking up papers, finding out, and actually found out that the law of the land says that if someone has had a stroke, that they are entitled to have rehabilitation. So, and with this knowledge back, I marched to the ward and asked to see whoever was in charge. She was absolutely lovely, beautiful, beautiful person. And she sat with me and she said, I agree with you. She says, Willie would definitely benefit. She says, because there's still a lot of the old Willie there. She says, but she says, it's not really up to me. And I says, well, who is it up to? And she says, well, it's up to his consultant, and he will then see the physio and the occupational therapist. And I went, right, okay, let's make it happen. Can I please have a meeting with them? So I went into a meeting and I was the only sort of a lay person, if you like. And there was about 12 professionals in the room, all having their say about why Willie should not get rehab. And I'm standing there with my bundle of papers and I'm thinking, no, you're not getting away with this. Willie deserves rehab and I'm the only one that can make sure he gets it. So it ended up that the consultant turned to the ward sister and said, well, I've heard all the arguments. You're going to get the final say. And Elizabeth, the ward sister, turned around and went, well, I think Willie deserves to have it. So he went to rehab, learned to walk again. His speech had never been affected, so he never shut up because he spoke incessantly and spoke to everybody. But he learned to walk, learned his balance got better. So good, in fact, that 2 weeks into his rehab, the bold boy escaped out of a side door and went for a walk in the woods. They got him back. A week later, he did the same thing again, and this time it was police, helicopters, everything. They found him a mile and a half away. This was the man who couldn't walk, and they had said that didn't need rehab. So I think you've really got to push for everything.
Thank you, and it's a really important example of how much you've had to kind of advocate and the amount that can take out of a person. And you know, Willie's very lucky that he had you fighting his corner and helping him get back to the strength of being able to climb out of a window. But at the same time, it's a really important reminder that you shouldn't have had to have that fight. You know, that shouldn't have all been on you to have that information. So thank you for sharing that. I have another question. This one's for Barbara, unless anyone is keen to put their hand up or put one in the chat. So I will ask this to you, Barbara. This piece of work you've done with carers as co-researchers on the work that you're doing and informing your approach. What do you think would have been different or is different about involving people as co-researchers than if you had asked them to be involved as participants?
No, thanks, Rosie. What an important question, isn't it? Like, I think there is, even between among us researchers, I think sometimes we get this wrong, like co-researchers versus participants, patient and public involvement, patient and public engagement, lay members. I think, like, probably if there is a literature overview, there may be hundreds of terms used for this, and different people use it differently. So my understanding is, and please anyone in the room correct me, basically research participants are really people who the research is about, and they're helping us answer research questions. So in this case, you would, for example, want to find out, like, well, how often do you exercise as a carer? So we would recruit carers, and then they would just fill in the survey, you know, and then we will analyze the data. So really, they would be like, how do you say, the target population. So there will be those who the research is about, and they will be providing us answers to our questions. However, our approach is different. Here we are basically saying that we want to do research that is with carers of people living with dementia, and they are basically equal partners in research. So traditionally, I think the research team would be mostly academics. Maybe sometimes we would engage with healthcare professionals or people working in adult social care, etc. And then those research team would make the key decisions. Here we basically are saying, well, the research should be really about what is most important to carers of people living dementia. So they really should have a say in what we want to ask. And in this stage, we really engage with them even before we got funding. So they really shaped the whole research proposal. So we were asking, well, what do you think is the most important to focus on? Like we almost started from the scratch, like, well, what does well-being and health means to you? What are the key concerns? And, and then we, of course, go down the way, like how we are going to answer these questions and how we are going to collect the data. So they are not going to be participants in research. They're not going to provide us the answers per se. They are really like research members making those decisions, and they bring a range of expertise. I think that's important to highlight, because sometimes we see carers only bringing the caring expertise. But let's remember, they have a range of skills, like range of backgrounds, like range of professional backgrounds, that they can do even better as researchers. A lot of them has fantastic project management skills, communication skills, dissemination skills, we can name it, time management skills, etc. So really here in this project, we draw on all their skills. So I think it's really about shifting the power, I would say. Who is making this decision? Is it researchers, is commissioners, etc. Winnie, would you like to add anything? And Rosie, of course, or anyone else? Winnie, what was your perception?
I think you covered it very, very well, Barbara. When I came on to your research team, I don't know what I expected, but I found that it was so easy to fit in with everyone else, and wasn't so different from partners in research, really. We all had a story to tell, we all told it, we all worked together. You were right, you could see the different skills coming in, the different skill sets that people had. That again, we saw that in partners in research. So yeah, I don't see a big difference, not really.
Do you think, though, Winnie, your experience has been different between doing this type of thing and participating in somebody's study? Because I think you've been involved as a participant, I think, in research before. Although I could be wrong about that.
I'm trying to remember, actually. I'm waiting on someone getting back to me, but I'm going to be involved in another piece of research. But I think I had done a lot of research, but the research I had done was for something very different, because my hobby is genealogy. So I was used to pulling out threads and finding out how things went. And research is research, really.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to throw one more question at you, and then if no one else has any questions, we can wrap it up and save it for if there's questions that come in on the back of people watching this, then we can obviously share those with you. But it's the classic question, Barbara, so I will start with you on this one about I suppose we've talked about the benefits of involving unpaid carers in a more kind of equal role. But what do you think some of the challenges are, not necessarily to their involvement, but also that we maybe need to make funders aware of, and people looking to take this type of approach in the future, the kind of things that they should keep in mind when planning this type of work?
No, I think this is a very important question, I think, because we definitely see a push toward engaging members of the public basically in our research, and whether it's co-production or whether it's just engagement and involvement, right? I think nowadays you cannot even submit research applications without that involvement. However, let's be honest, we should pay members of the public, and there are clear guidelines how much we should pay members of the public for the contribution. So of course you need a funding for that. And how you are supposed to pay members of the public when you don't have a funding. So that's one thing, like there really needs to be a better system where we can get this funding in place, especially while we are still working on applications. And of course, it depends how we see this, and also depends, of course, what's available. But I think having a one-off conversation, it's not enough. It's not really shaping a research in a way that I would hope we would engage with members of the public. So I think it is costly. In this research, in this specific research project, I think we spent around 5,000 just to pay basically 8 carers to contribute to this research project. I think it also requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of time from researchers themselves. I was also very much inexperienced when I started to work in co-produced ways. So luckily I had Rosie who provided an incredible support, and the carers were also extremely supportive. But I think that's also something to remember. It's a skill. It may seem like, oh, everyone can work this way, but no, it's a specific method and a specific approach. So I think it's really important to remember that you need the time to learn how to do it. You have to, and it takes time. It not only takes time to prepare for these meetings, for example, and also afterwards, but also the pace of the research project and working will be slower. Just a practical thing, like carers told me they can only meet once per month. While, in maybe traditional research environment, when we are very working like on deadlines, we would meet every week, or there is a quick turnaround. This is simply not possible. So that's something to remember. And I think the key is that, I'm still quite confused. That could be just me, like, what is it exactly the funders want us to do? They still want this value for money, whatever they define it. They want also everything to be delivered fast. At the same time, they want to see a meaningful engagement, but I'm not sure whether that's really possible. So I would say, yeah, maybe the systemic changes are important. And from my point of view, also, training is important to researchers. Also, I think this, I would say, emotional support. I think it can be very taxing emotionally, because it depends really what your topic is. But you kind of during these meetings, you hear such a, how do you say it, in-depth experiences, and often people have a range of experiences and range of reactions and emotions. So it's not always like, oh, life is great. We have a fun together. It's one can argue it's almost a little bit a therapy session. So that's something like to really care after yourself. And I also feel like we always say this. It's a completely different way of working, way that as researchers we love to have a clarity, we love to have a plan. We have these proposals that we follow to dot. With research, especially with co-productions, you can have a lot of control, but ideally you have some control, and the rest control have other people, and you have to be open to that. And I find it really difficult to navigate and balance. Like, I think at the beginning, maybe I was a little bit anxious to be comfortable in my position as a researcher and say people, well, this is not what we can really answer with research. But I learned myself, like, okay, I'm bringing my own expertise. So I think that balancing, like, okay, how to make this equal? How is it not just about carers, etc. So yeah, I think there are a few thoughts. But if you have any, Winnie and Rosie or anyone else, like, that would be great. Like, what you think are the key barriers? Maybe Winnie, from your perspective.
I found for me, as you said, emotions come into it, but I could have done with a debriefing. There was times when emotions were so high and you'd heard so much, there was so much pain coming from people, that afterwards you just wanted to talk it through. And there isn't really, it's hard enough to get the hours in that you've got to get without the debriefing as well. But I felt it was an important part, and I think it's something that you would have to make aware of to the funders, that when you're speaking about emotions, then you've got to build this in. And that was the thing I noticed most of all.
Yeah, and I think it's something we certainly come across in practice too, you know, that we always try and stay on a meeting a bit longer if we can, and try to make sure there's always space between, say, a co-production meeting and any future meetings, so that there's room for people to stay on and unwind if they need to. But yeah, when you're trying to do that within a particularly an academic week, that can be really difficult, and you don't always, sometimes you think you're doing the most kind of light-hearted topic, and you can be like, everyone's going to have a lovely time talking about this, and then you can get a curveball. And I think sometimes people forget that just because we have a lot of fun doing these things, and we absolutely do, and you know, I laugh lots in our co-research meetings, but it doesn't mean that we're not dealing with a topic that is of course difficult, and it should never undermine that. That is always going to be the case. We just try and make sure that we bring around the positives where we can, because that's how we keep going, isn't it? I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to wrap that up there if that's okay. But thank you so much to Barbara and Winnie for joining us today. I know that lots of people will really benefit from hearing more about the specific work you've been doing, Barbara, but also about these some of these challenges and benefits to taking this type of approach. And it's really important to have people like yourself here, Winnie, to really emphasise why we should be involving people with lived experience across the different parts of research, both in the development of it, but also in talking to others about it and making sure it's that shared story. So thank you very much. And last, if there's any final questions from the other people on the call, I'm going to ask Helen if you wouldn't mind stopping the recording, and we will have our next webinar. In fact, actually, do you want that?